So when we think about empaths in romantic relationships, the typical scenario is that the empathic partner is giving a lot. They're serving. They're the ones who have been romantic. They're the ones who are giving time, attention, energy to the relationship. Quickly have a little sip of water here and get ready. Welcome to Mindset Talk with me, your host Jabu Zwane. Thank you so much once again for tuning in. Mindset Talk is a podcast that helps you to understand what are mindsets, how do mindsets form, what is the function of mindsets in our lives, and how can you best create the type of mindsets you need to build the life that you want. In this podcast, you're going to change your life one thought at a time. This is a place of healing, restoration, growth, transformation, and also for thriving. Thank you. Start off by saying thank you again to the Rise Studio, my man Eop. Thank you for providing us with this platform. And just to remind me once again, please do subscribe, hit that notification bell as well so that you can be notified of future episodes. I'm excited about this particular episode because we're going to be talking a little bit about empaths in romance. So we continue on the empath series as part of the launching the podcast. We spoke a little bit about how empaths attract antipathic personalities like narcissists, psychopaths, manipulative people, people who are who have parasitic traits, and people who are extremely selfish. So I suggest that you go back and go watch that episode because it was fire, man. It was pumped with a lot of incredible knowledge around empathy. What are empaths? Once again, empaths are people that have that deep love and care for others. They're able to understand how others are going through whatever they're going through, feel the need to help them, to be there for them, to support them, to care for them, to give, to share their resources and make their time available for others. But unfortunately, sometimes empaths end up finding themselves just by themselves with nobody to help them out because people don't always think that they need help. And in the past episode, I talked a bit about how you can deal with that. Today, there are two things I'm going to do in this podcast. I'm going to talk about empaths in romantic relationships. And I'm going to talk about how empaths end up being wounded and pessimistic. I think it's one of the most common concerns whenever I bring out these types of videos. People feel like empathy is so burdensome. They'll say, I don't want to feel so deeply anymore. Can I just switch it off so that I don't feel people's pain anymore? But unfortunately, you can't. And if you try to apply some of the strategies, like, for example, cutting people off and all of that, if you are an empath, it doesn't sit very well with you because your psychology is such that you value people. And even though, of course, it may give you relief when you're cutting people off, but the way you experience it on your mind, on your heart, on your emotions, and on your body is normally quite tormenting. Why? Because you honestly do care deeply for people. And so when you are disconnected from them, it can be quite hard. And that's why it's important rather to learn the skills of how to resolve conflict, effective communication, pausing your ears, not feeling so much under pressure to say yes or to say no in situations. And of course, objectively looking at your capacity as to whether or not you can help somebody. And that's probably the best way rather to deal with your empathy rather than having to, employ strategies that will not work for you and for your traits as an empath. Just quickly have a little sip of water here and get ready. Okay, now starting with how empaths get wounded. Now, one of the things that I do, especially when I talk about the different types of empaths in the book, I normally start off with a story. I write a story, and in the story, and then I'll try to break it down in such a way that we can be able to understand exactly what this type of empath is. So, in talking about. But before I go into, wounded, pessimistic empath, I'm going to talk about empaths in romantic relationships. I'm a firm believer in that empaths if two empaths are in a relationship, it can become beautiful. It can become beautiful because they're considerate of each other, they give each other space to grow, they are supportive of one another, they don't dismiss each other's feelings, they validate and acknowledge each other's feelings, and it can be quite a beautiful relationship to have. But it can be quite challenging if you are an empath, though, and then you happen to be in a relationship with somebody who's not quite as empathic as you, because you're not able to say yeah, no, you're not able to draw boundaries. And also it can be such that if both of you are empaths, and let's say, for example, you're operating in a church environment, that you don't know when to say no to the invitations to participate in ministry, to give money, to assist in whatever need that has been presented, even in society. Maybe you're part of a charity or you're part of some social work within the community. If both of you are empaths, you can find you committing too many resources of your family to these projects, to these advocacies, to these campaigns, to these needs that are never ending, by the way. There's a verse in the Bible that I really, really love where Christ is saying, the poor you will always have with you, which gives us an understanding that there's never a time where we can eradicate poverty. I mean, the UN has got this whole project about poverty eradication, but Christ said himself, the poor you'll always have with you. So there'll always be somebody who's got less than you, who needs more than you, who is in a worse of situation than you. And accepting that as an empath can be a very good starting point of seeing, or rather of managing your empathy as an empowered person, rather than it making you feel like you're a victim of this power that takes over you and you don't know how to do it. So let's check out empaths in romantic relationships, and it's in chapter 7 of the book. So in romantic relationships, empaths have a profound ability to love wholeheartedly, anticipate their partner's needs, and create an environment of emotional safety. For empaths, love is not simply an emotion, but an active, intentional commitment to seeing and valuing their partner and at their deepest level. They're the ones who notice the smallest details, a change in a tone, a sigh, the subtle flicker of emotion, and instinctively offer comfort and reassurance. Empaths remember special occasions without reminders, sense unspoken struggles, and often go out of their way to ease their partner's burdens. And this is unique. This unique capacity to care deeply makes their love feel like a rare and an extraordinary gift. However, this natural inclination to give can come at a great cost when it is not being reciprocated or balanced. Empaths often find themselves in relationships where their emotional generosity is taken for granted or even exploited. Their focus on their partner's happiness, while admirable, often causes them to neglect their own needs. Because empaths are deeply intuitive and emotionally connected individuals, making proactive anticipations of their partner's needs. The romantic relationships are both uniquely beautiful and challenging, and we'll go into that a little bit. So when we think about empaths in romantic relationships, the typical scenario is that the empathic partner is giving a lot. They're serving. They're the ones who are being romantic. They're the ones who are giving time, attention, energy to the relationship, while the other person doesn't feel much of maybe needing to do anything, because there's almost an exaggerated taking on of the responsibility of the relationship. And you know that you are an empath, you are the empathic one in the relationship. When you are the one that's always checking to see whether or not your partner is okay. When you're concerned by the change that I've said in the tone of a voice, or even in the behavior, when you see sadness, when you can know that I am fine, is not that they're really fine, but actually it's a covering up of some kind of a deep-seated issue that they are not maybe feeling safe enough to bring forward. But because you're an empath, you create a psychologically safe environment within the romantic setting so that the other person may be able to express what they're going through. But unfortunately, in many, many instances, you might find that because empaths tend to attract antipathic personalities, as we said in the last episode, the antipathic person, on the other hand, then would take advantage of that. They're not going to try to find out how you are. As a matter of fact, they insist that you be okay, and then they might want you to continue to be as generous, as helpful, as emotionally available, no matter whatever you're going through. Maybe it's a situation where, let's say, for example, husband and wife are working, both of them are working together. Wife comes from home, wife is still expected to cook, to make all of the domestic chores in the home, while maybe the husband just sits around and does not help. You may think, oh, maybe it's a matter of tragedy, or a matter of tradition. But I think that is also a factor of understanding the change, understanding the times. When you see that the other person has gone through as much work as you've gone through, has spent as much time as you spent throughout the day working, is it reasonable as far as the physical ability of a human being to expect them to do more things after work while you do absolutely nothing and wait to be served? If you consider it, perhaps you might want to say, can I be able to assist, or can we rather get maybe takeaways or whatever the case might be, as a way of ensuring that there's some kind of collaboration there and there's some kind of consideration. So we can sit and have arguments about it's tradition or not. The question becomes, are we supposed to serve traditions, or are traditions supposed to serve us? Are we supposed to serve culture, or is culture supposed to serve us? What happens when traditions and culture and beliefs and religions and all of those things bring harm to us as people, where we are unable to feel the love, the happiness, the joy, the comfort, the consolation that we need, especially when we're going through certain situations? And I think it's a big part of this whole empathy thing, is that empathy allows us to adapt to human needs, as opposed to sticking to the rules and the laws because the laws say we should do so. An empathic person understands that if the circumstances have changed, if conditions have changed, it's important for human beings to adapt to that. And with any adaptation, there are different types of challenges. And even in romance, I think it's a very important question around, should relationships become more empathic? And the reason why I'm saying that is because when I sit and I look at a lot of the activities on social media, a lot of the comments on social media, there's a very strong antipathic sentiment where there's almost like a fight between men and women, where everybody is all about what everybody's supposed to do, but without fully taking into consideration the human experience of a woman in the modern times, where she has to work, where she has to also look after the children, where she's still looking for career, but that is happening in order to assist the man, the husband, in a very trying time where the economy is bad, where there aren't as many opportunities, where they're not earning as much money as what they used to before. Wisdom and empathy says to us, it's crucial for us to adapt so that we can carry each other's burdens. If we just go on traditions, if we just go on culture, if we just go on what we've seen our parents do without fully considering what is currently happening, the changes that are happening, somebody in this situation is going to get hurt, or even both people. Because if your partner is burdened by the conditions of the relationship, you also will be burdened, because they can't fully be there for you. They can't love you as well as you need to be loved, as long as they are burdened, and perhaps you feel like you're not burdened. And for me, that is a challenge of empathy. It's a challenge of considering one another, especially in romantic settings. Because if we don't adapt, we're going to find ourselves in trouble. And empathy in romance should be adaptable. Now, let's look at it. What are some of the challenges? So the challenges of an empath, similar to what we've already said so far, in a romantic relationship, is that putting the partner's needs first. And normally, in terms of the types, the type of empath that normally puts their partner's needs first is the optimistic empath, an altruistic empath, and also an emotional empath. There's a lot more about that in the book. Empaths often equate love with sacrifice. And it is true, because love is sacrificial. In so doing, prioritizing their partner's happiness over their own. For example, an empath might abandon their dreams, delay personal goals, or even put their health on the back burner to support their partner. While this is selflessness, it may come from while the selflessness may come from a place of deep love, it can backfire when it becomes habitual and when it is unreciprocated. And as we've said before, so many empaths experience much of their life a lack of reciprocity, a lack of return for the same love. I said the other day on a video, give the love that you are being given. Give the love return the love that has been given to you. If you're with somebody whose love you are not willing to return, have the decency and the integrity and the kindness to let them go, as opposed to staying there, taking from them, knowing full well that within you there is no willingness or a desire to return the love. And I said also, if you are with someone that is unwilling to return the same love that you're given to them, pray that you've got the courage and the strength to walk away. Because the ultimate end of that is regret and resentment. Regret and resentment are two of the probably most negative emotions that empaths end up with towards the end of their lives, or maybe when they're much older, when they look back to see how much they have sacrificed for this person, how much they've supported this person in the young years, in the vital years, in the productive years, they lived supporting someone else, and then this person turns around to not be a reciprocal person, and instead, when they find themselves in a leveraged position financially, societally, in terms of leadership, and even in the workplace where they've been promoted, the antipathic personality comes out. And instead, actually, they see you now as being less, not appreciating the fact that you were there before. And that is why it's important that as an empath, that as much as it is true that you want to be self-sacrificial, and you should, but it should not be at the expense of your own dreams, at the expense of your own goals. There must be something that you're still doing for yourself so that you don't find yourself in the back burner. The impact of this is this. When empaths put their partner's needs first consistently, they risk losing themselves. And we've seen this a lot in a lot of movies. And we also have heard this, we hear this a lot in podcasts. When people are coming up and say, I lost myself. I didn't know who I was anymore. I felt like I lost my identity. And this is because you probably have served yourself to the diminishing of who you are whilst you're bringing out the other person. And then the relationship developed a dynamic where the power of the relationship is your invisibility and the visibility of the other person. In other words, your strengths are submitted to exalt the other person, and they get exalted at your own invisibility. And you create that. You create that dynamic in the relationship. Okay, so the impact of that is over time, the empath may feel invisible, unappreciated, or undervalued in the relationship. And this imbalance often leads to emotional depletion and resentment, which can silently erode the love and the connection that they have worked so hard to build and to preserve. Okay, so here's an example that I give. A wife who's an optimistic empath might quit her job to take care of her children while supporting her spouse's career. Years later, as she watches her partner thrive while her own dreams fade into the background, resentment and frustration may begin to surface. What to do with this? What do you do about this? Reflect on your needs. Reflect on your needs and realize that your needs also are valid. Your needs are also valid. Take time to identify what you need to fulfill to feel fulfilled and respected in the relationship. 2, prioritize reciprocity. Ensure that both you and your partner are making sacrifices and compromises, not just one-sided efforts. There's absolutely nothing wrong to saying, listen, I would love you to love me with the same love that I give you. I would love you to give you to give me the same respect that I give you. To sacrifice in the same way that I sacrifice for you. It cannot be so that I operate in my strength to serve the relationship, but you're operating in your least to benefit from the relationship. I'm going to say that again. It cannot be that I'm operating in my strength to serve the good of the relationship while you're operating in your least to gain the best from the relationship. And this is one of the greatest challenges that I suppose most empathic romantic partners then fails, is that you put the best foot forward, both feet forward, and you make sure that both of your feet are the best, and you're giving all of you can, but then the other person does not feel the need to reciprocate and give the least. So the second thing that we're going to talk about is, how you in relationships, empathic partners can absorb their partner's emotions. And a typical absorber of emotions would be an emotional empath and an intuitive empath. So empaths are like emotional sponges, absorbing the feelings of their partner as though they were their own. If the partner is happy, the empath feels uplifted. If their partners are anxious or upset, the empath feels burdened by those emotions. This dynamic can be particularly draining if the partner struggles with chronic stress and anger and mental issues. Now, let's go into that a little bit. Now, here you are as an empathic partner. You've got a partner that is prone to negative emotions. Maybe they're pessimistic. Maybe they're cynical. Maybe there's somebody that is going through some kind of trauma. Or maybe they just have a personality that is not very friendly personality. Get very easily angry, very easily triggered, very easily find themselves not being happy and being comfortable staying in a state of unhappiness for a very long time. You ask them, how are you? I'm fine. And they are reactionary, and then they give you attitude all the time, and you start to walk around eggshells in the home. There's an issue of silent treatment. The person does not ever feel the need to explain themselves when they're feeling offended. And instead, they decide to punish you. They decide to not say anything because they're expecting you to figure out what you have done. Somebody will say, listen, if you don't know what you've done, I'm not going to teach you how to treat me. I'm not going to teach you to be sensitive. And then you find yourself in a situation where now you are stressed out because you can tell the person is grieved. They're going through some kind of pain, but you don't know what they're going through. Or sometimes Sometimes you've got a person that is... There's some people who are very victim-minded, right? They've developed an identity through being victims. They like to rehearse their stories to solicit pity so that they can feel loved and cared for whatever reason. It could be that they're feeling that because they grew up that way. Maybe they were taught that they were the most special person. Maybe they were taught that they're not allowed to get hurt. And whenever any kind of pain they experienced, people would just fawn over them. Everybody crowds around them to try and make them feel comforted and to feel better. And they still have not developed any kind of healthy emotional ways to deal with pain. And now here you are as an empath. And in the relationship, they play victim all the time. And then they do that to try and get attention from you. Or maybe they get angry. They're angry, and then they're always angry, and then in their anger they know that you're going to respond. They want to find out what's going on. Or they're feeling just sorry for themselves, and they're cynical, and then they know that you're going to come and try to motivate them as an optimistic empath, as somebody who has hope for the future, you got hope for the entire marriage, and now you're trying to always motivate this person, always encourage them. It's important to realize that as an empath, because you've got the propensity and the high capacity to take on people's emotions, to manage that, to not allow yourself sometimes to be too much into thinking, I wonder what this person is going through. I want to take away whatever they're going through so that they can go through what they're going through. And if you can't, you feel like you've failed. You feel like you're not doing enough. And now you're feeling guilty. It's important to manage that and understand that at the end of the day, everybody is responsible for their own emotional experience. Nobody can go into somebody else's emotional structure, turn a few buttons off and make them become happy if they don't want to be happy. It's not your responsibility, and you cannot be able to change someone in that case. So please manage that and understand that you cannot do it. So what do you do with this? What do you do with so that you can avoid absorbing people's emotions? Practice emotional detachment. Learn to recognize when you are carrying emotions that belong to you. I've already shared that. Engage in grounding exercises like using mindfulness. Perhaps, like one of the things that I do is that I try, maybe it's meditation, I don't know. But I try to be in spaces where I try to empty my mind and not to think about anything. It's not always easy. The more I do it, the more I'm getting better at it, where I try to just block my mind and just to try and reset it a little bit. And then deep breathing to return to your own emotional state. I do this a lot, and I'm going to share with this little exercise with you. Perhaps you can do it on your own time. So what you want to do is you want to stand up. I can't stand up now because I'm in a short here. But you want to stand up. You want to take a deep breath. You want to take a deep breath and hold the breath for as long as you can. You hold the breath for as long as you can. And just as you're about to pass out, you tense your body and then you release. So you can do that 3 times. You take a deep breath, and then as you hold your breath, tense your body, tense your fists, tense your toes, tense your butt, tense your chest, everything. You tense it as much as you can. You hold it there until you feel like you're passing out, and then you let it go. You release. All right. Hopefully you don't have any medical conditions that will be triggered with this exercise. So just please make sure that you are able to do this, especially if you know that you've got some issues medically speaking. We don't want to get you into trouble. But try and find out some breathing exercises so that at least you can be able to reset and get out of that. All right. And then other things that encourage emotional accountability. Right. Support your partner in managing their own emotions rather than taking them over and as if it's your own responsibility. The other thing about empaths in romantic relationships is this issue of conflict avoidance. Now, empaths, look, because of deep care for other people's well-being, there's a mindset of thinking that conflict is a bad, as opposed to thinking of conflict as an opportunity to find common ground. Like to think of conflict as an indicator that there is a place in the relationship where there is no connection, where there is separation. And then how do you find a way then rather to find the common ground so that you can close the gaps, so that you can make sure that you still stay together and walk together, as opposed to walking separately. And a lot of empaths are conflict avoidant because they're afraid of diminishing the peace. They're afraid that if they stand their ground and speak up for themselves, perhaps they're being insensitive and inconsiderate. And also they don't want to get into some kind of a fight. It could be for different reasons. Perhaps you've learned growing up, you grew up in an environment where there was a lot of violence, a lot of argument, a lot of domestic violence, a lot of fighting. And because you are somebody who's got softer and who's got an empathic heart, you don't want to experience that in your marriage. And therefore you become conflict avoidant. You start to submit, and not rather submit, to suppress your feelings when you are unhappy, your feelings when you are feeling a bit angry, your feelings even when you're feeling a bit confused and frustrated. So when you're confused, you don't want to ask questions just in case. It creates more tension. When you're frustrated, you don't want to show it just in case it leads to a conflict and maybe even to an angry outburst. Therefore, you continue to suppress your feelings. The unfortunate part about that, again, is that you're setting yourself up for resentment and bitterness in the future, where you've got too many unspoken words, too many unsaid grievances, too many unresolved conflicts. And there comes a point where you've had enough and you just want to be relieved of all of these burdens that have been building up over the years. It's important as an empath to understand that conflict is not in itself an indication of something wrong, but an opportunity actually to fix whatever it is that either has been broken or that is breaking, so that you can avoid it. So the motivation should not be fear. The motivation should be optimism about what you can resolve when you have conflict. So because empaths are natural peacekeepers, they often avoid conflict at all costs, fearing that disagreements will damage their relationships or cause pain to their partner. This aversion to conflict can lead to suppressing emotions, bottling up frustrations, and tolerating unhealthy behaviors like keeping the peace. The impact is this: avoiding conflict doesn't eliminate problems, it amplifies them. So the longer the problem remains unresolved, the worse it gets. An issue does not become better when you don't deal with it. In fact, it gets worse. Often that is the nature of whatever it is that is getting broken. Suppressed emotions often resurface as passive aggressiveness, resentment, and emotional withdrawal. Over time, these unresolved issues can erode trust and intimacy. The other thing about unresolved conflict and these things is that they start to alter the way you perceive your partner. You start to see the person as, from a negative perspective, as somebody who is who causes you grief, causes you pain. But if people sometimes don't know what it is that they're doing to hurt you, and you don't feel the boldness, the courage to be able to express what it is, can we really truly blame them if they continue behaviors that are hurting us, if they don't know? Because some hurtful behaviors are not as obvious. When I smack you, it's obvious that's hurtful. When I'm swearing and cursing at you, it is obvious that I'm hurting you. But there are certain types of behaviors, such as maybe the way the person speaks to you, that may make you feel like you are not being seen. Because maybe where they come from or the way they grew up, they didn't deal with issues. And for them, issues just dissipate. But for you, they stay in your conscious mind. You don't sleep, you don't eat well, emotionally you get exhausted as long as the matter has not been resolved. If that is something that you prefer but your partner may not be aware of it, it's important that you raise it so that at least you give them a chance to react to it or respond to it. And hopefully in so doing, then it creates a healthier relationship. So avoiding conflict is not a solution. All right? It's not a solution. So what to do? Reframe conflict, as I've already explained. See it rather as an opportunity to find where the gaps are and try to fill them. Understand that conflict can be constructive and it is necessary for growth. All right? Speak assertively. Express your concerns calmly and respectfully using I feel statements rather than you've made me feel this way. So we don't want to attack a person. We want to talk about what is the problem with the behavior. So you do something called the it mindset. And the it mindset is that when we are having conflict, we've got to talk about the it. How is the thing that is happening, affecting the relationship? Where is it affecting the relationship, and what are the potential consequences should this persist and it is not dealt with? So you're concentrating on it. For example, you'd say, listen, when you are talking to me, screaming and yelling, it confuses me, or it makes me feel as though I am your enemy. It makes me feel as though I'm no longer your partner, but I am now somebody that you've got to fight with. and it doesn't make me feel loved, right? So you're not saying when you're angry, you're so unloving. You yell at me like I'm not even your friend, like I'm your enemy. I don't like being treated that way, and I want you to change it. So when you focus on the it, you'll say, what is it that this person is doing? What is it that it is affecting? How is it that is making you feel? What is it that you'd prefer that the person do to fix the problem that we're discussing, to achieve the outcome that we're trying to achieve as a relation, as partners? I say this to couples all the time, that whenever you're having a conflict, it's very important to remember four crucial things. And perhaps you are not a very empathic person, and hopefully this can help you to become a little bit more empathic and create an empathic consciousness in your relationship, an empathic environment and experience in your relationship. Four crucial things. The first thing is that remember who the person is outside of you. Remember that every person is created by God, and they are not yours, but they are their own entity, and respect who a person is outside of you. If you are approaching a girl, if you're being approached by a man, remember who that person is even before they approached you. So unless your plan is to step on them to go and add something to them, to add something valuable in the relationship, don't even step up if you've got nothing to add. Because unfortunately, many people, especially men, we approach women because we love what we see, the looks. We love the looks. We love the, whatever it is that we think we're going to get from approaching them. So we're approaching them with a gain in mind. But what can I say? The integrity must be, what am I going to add in your life? What am I going to add in your life? Not what am I going to receive in return. So remember who the person is outside of you, because then that'll put some boundaries, especially regarding how you treat them, what you say to them, what you do to them, what you do for them, and how you do that. Number two, remember what attracted you to the person in the first place. And sometimes, as we grow in the relationship, we get to figure out maybe what attracted us is not the best thing in the world, but remember what is now attracting you in the relationship. Okay? Because then it reminds you of what makes them special to you. When you intentionally try to remember what attracted you to the person, you don't forget what makes them special. And again, that helps you to draw certain boundaries in terms of how you treat them. The third thing is that remember what it is that you're trying to build together. Remember what it is that you're trying to build together and what you have been building. Don't destroy your relationship in a fit of rage, in a moment of confusion, in a moment of frustration, and then you say all the wrong things, where in the end, it becomes very difficult to recover from. If you remember who the person is, if you remember what attracted you to them, it helps set up those boundaries so that you don't say things that in the end are going to become extremely difficult to recover from. It's going to become extremely difficult to recover from, right? And the last thing is that, you must remember who you are to the person. Who you are to the person. Like, who is it that you want to be to your husband, to your wife? And to protect that. You want to be kind, considerate, compassionate, understanding. You want to serve. You want to submit. You want to make sure that you take care of the person. And whatever it is that whatever behavior that stands in that misrepresents your character, your intentions, then you deal with that, as opposed to, again, avoiding certain things. Now, the other thing that empaths then tend to do is that, and I'm going to put these two together, is that they settle for less than what they deserve and suppress their voice. Settling for less than what they deserve. Empaths often struggle with self-worth, leading to them accepting less than what they deserve in relationships, Whether it is tolerating a lack of emotional support, unequal effort, and even toxic behaviors, empaths often convince themselves that it's good enough. They'll find a way to settle. Typically, this is an insecure empath and emotional empath. The impact of this is this. By settling, empaths risk perpetuating cycles of unfulfillment and disappointment. This pattern not only diminishes their self-esteem, but also sends the message to their partner that their needs are secondary. This is something that we need to remember as human beings are creatures of habit. We're creatures of habit for different reasons. And those reasons have to do with our own human limitations. Part of the human limitations is that we cannot predict the future. That's why we cultivate habits. We look into our history to see how things have worked in the past. This way we are able to use that information to try and approximate a little bit in terms of what's going to happen in the future, and gives us a little sense of control. And because of that, when we create certain habits in the relationship where one partner is the one that is constantly giving, the other one is receiving. The other one is serving, the other one is the one that is a master. The other one is constantly caring and checking in, and the other one doesn't feel propelled at all to do anything to serve the relationship. That becomes the culture, the nature of the relationship. And that's why you find sometimes, I'm doing counseling, and the one partner will be like, but everything was fine. And the other one is like, but nothing was fine. I've been unhappy. And the other one will be like, but I didn't know you were unhappy. I'm happy. And the person that is saying that they are happy, they really are truly happy because they were being served the whole time. And unfortunately, and as an empath, there's a party that says, but how come they could not do for me what I was doing for them? The thing about it is this: if you don't express your needs in the relationship, and the other person has a right to assume that your needs are being fulfilled, if you're not stating what is it that you're unhappy about. And sadly, empaths have difficulty articulating what they are unhappy about. That's why you find that long-term relationships leave them exhausted. Long-term relationships leave them feeling, I served, I loved, I cared, I supported, I uplifted, I did all the great things that a good wife, a good husband is supposed to do, but in the end, I got nothing in return. We have to honor the integrity of communication and ongoing engagement in the relationship. And part of it is this: I need to communicate my issues. I need to communicate my needs. I need to talk to what is important to me. All right? And suppressing the voice also is the same thing, The impact of that is that if you're suppressing your voice, it leads to feelings of invisibility and fulfillment. And over time, the empath may feel disconnected from their own identity and resentful to their partner for not meeting unspoken expectations. It is suggested by many people that unspoken expectations are one of the reasons why people have relationship problems. I don't know if I can put it as the number one reason. I don't think I can do that. So what are some of the things that you're supposed to do? It's important to be honest and to express yourself. Challenge the fear of hurting other people, and remember that voicing your needs strengthens your relationship rather than weakening the relationship. Have an open dialogue and create a space where both partners can express themselves honestly. Be careful of resentment that is lurking about down there in the future if you don't deal with it. It's very, very important. Okay, so if you are struggling with bitterness as an empath, it's important to address the resentment instead of waiting for it to continue to fester and to continue to grow. Don't allow your unspoken frustrations to build into bitterness. Seek professional support where necessary. Couples therapy can help rebuild the trust and intimacy. Practice gratitude and focusing on your partner's positive qualities and to counteract feelings of contempt. Because here's what happens. If you've been bitter for a very long time, it starts to affect your mindsets, and you can develop a cynical mindset, a negative mindset where you don't see any hope. And so you start to dismiss any kind of growth. Let's say your partner eventually realizes, my goodness, I can't believe I've been so neglectful. I can't believe I've been so immature. I can't believe I've not been as generous and as committed to my wife, to my wife's husband, the way that I should have been. And they start to act on that. If you don't deal with your bitterness, if you don't deal with your bitterness becomes like a poison that poisons your attitude, and now you become cynical, you become sarcastic, you become dismissive, and in the end, your partner starts to feel like maybe this is not going to go anywhere, maybe too much damage has been done. So if you're still happy with the relationship and you want to make sure the relationship succeeds, it's important to open yourself up to that. And for me as a Christian, it's important for you to pray. It's important to ask your prayer partners and people to support you and to pray with you and to be there with you to cover your relationship up with prayer. Maybe you're not a Christian and you have a different way, but this is the way that I do it. That I've got a support structure of men and women that I'll tell. I may not necessarily give them full details, but at least I know somebody out there is covering me up in prayer. But I also have the same people also that counsel my relationship, and that help me to become objective, so that I don't drown in bitterness. If you don't manage your empathy right in your romantic relationships, instead of them becoming these beautiful experiences where there is a reciprocal exchange of love, it can become exhausting where you feel like you've been a slave of a system of love, a system that dismisses you, a system that does not acknowledge your needs, a system that has made you feel like you are undeserving. And so it's important that we learn how to manage ourselves as empaths. And I'm going to close off. I said I was going to talk about insecure. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to have enough time for that. We'll leave that up for the next segment. So it's important. Let me quickly read up and say here. There is a research that was done by Dr. John Gottman, and he wrote a book that's called The Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse in divorces. In their research, they have estimated by 97.3% accuracy, 93.7% accuracy, couples that are going to divorce. And he mentions 4 reasons why most couples may actually end up divorcing. The first one is, again, contempt. And contempt is that building of bitterness and resentment that you built over time because you have not been saying anything that was being done to you. And now you become very resentful, very bitter, and you start to hate literally and get disgusted with your partner. Contempt happens, and they see it when they are doing counseling with the couples, and then the one couple starts to does a lot of rolling of their eyes, looks away, shaking their heads, not listening, anything that has been initiated towards them to try and redeem the relationship. They reject it through the rolling of the eyes, the shaking of the head, the side, whatever they do on the side to say, I'm not for this. The second one was self-justification or defensiveness. And defensiveness is where you don't acknowledge the wrong that you have done or acknowledge the other person's experience and how they're experiencing your relationship, and instead you are justifying your intention. You're making your intention a big issue instead of saying, I'm receiving feedback that says I need to do things better. And the third one was stonewalling. And stonewalling is what we call today silent treatment. And stonewalling is when somebody shuts down, somebody dismisses you, somebody decides not to treat you in a way that makes you feel loved and cared for, and distances themselves and takes weeks without talking to you. And even when they're talking to you in a very dismissive way. And what was the third one? I can't remember the fourth one now. So defending yourself, contempt, stonewalling. Oh, criticism. The last one is criticism. When there is too much criticism, either one partner or both of you are very critical of each other. So instead of love there's judgment. Instead of understanding there is rejection. Instead of curiosity there are assumptions and conclusions that have been made, most of the time in a negative way. And unfortunately, if you're an empathic partner, you may find that because you did not express there's things that you should have expressed, you can find yourself being critical. You can find yourself being vulnerable to what we call vulnerable narcissists. Narcissism and vulnerable narcissism is that there's legitimately you've been hurt. Legitimately some things have happened to you. But you've developed some kind of an identity around being somebody who's being hurt. And then it's actually a way of power, of gaining power in the relationship. And whenever the other person comes up and says, listen, can we do this? And I'm sorry, but you always pointing back. But you cheated. But you didn't tell me the truth. But you did this the other day. But you yelled at me. And you are keeping a record of all the wrong things that I've done to you to leverage them in the relationship, to make yourself feel like a victim. And you don't allow there to be progress in the relationship. And this is some of the dangers as an empath. If you don't manage it correctly, you are prone to these types of behaviors that in the end actually can end up sabotaging your relationship because you haven't learned how to deal with your empathy. Dealing with your empathy in romantic relationships requires maturity. It requires spiritual maturity. It requires emotional maturity. It requires even intellectual maturity in terms of how you deal with yourself more practically so that you don't, in the end, develop ways of thinking that's going to lead to the sabotage and to the end of your marriage or the end of your relationship. If you want to have a healthy relationship, you got to adopt healthy ways of dealing with your empathy and realize that just because you are an empath, you are not an angel, you are not pure, you are just a sinner just like everybody else, you've got mistakes just like everybody else, you can make mistakes like everybody else, and you don't have the right to sit there as a judge and say, I've got a good heart and that person is like this and therefore I'm being wronged. Hopefully this has been helpful to you. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. Remember, again, to please, if you love the content and you enjoy the episode, subscribe, hit the notification bell to ensure that you are notified in the future. I want to say thank you so much for tuning in and for being with us. And you've learned a lot today and I've shared quite a bit. Let me know in the comment section what stood out for you and if there's anything else in the future that you'd like me to address. And a shout out once again to Arise Studios for helping us out with this episode. Thank you, my man, Eob. Hamsakenelo. I want to thank you for that. And check you guys again next time. Cheers.